Okay, so back in 2021, Netflix dropped the Fear Street trilogy, and man, it was a huge deal. A total slasher phenomenon. But then, just a few years later, the sequel everyone was waiting for lands with a thud. Total disappointment. So you gotta ask, what happened?
All right, let's just dive right into the mystery here. How does a franchise that starts out so strong, we're talking words like remarkable, cohesive, end up with a sequel, Prom Queen, that gets called a letdown and a forgettable footnote? We're going to break down exactly why.
So, here's the game plan. We're going to look at what made the original such a phenomenon, then unpack all the hype for the sequel, figure out why it just didn't connect, and finally, what this all means for the future of Fear Street.
Okay, first up, let's jump back to 2021. This is when Netflix did something pretty wild, a horror event that seriously got everyone talking.
So instead of the usual movie release, Netflix dropped 3 interconnected films, one after another, over 3 straight weeks. I mean, what a move, right? It basically created this instant binge watch event for horror fans. Each film was a new piece of the puzzle, a different time period, and right from the get-go, they built this incredibly rich, cursed world.
So, the really interesting part is why it all worked so well. I mean, this wasn't just some lucky accident. It turns out there was a pretty clear formula for its success.
Yeah, the magic really boiled down to 3 key things. First, you had this one giant story told across 3 movies. Second, it was basically a love letter to different eras of horror. And third, and this is crucial, it actually dealt with some heavy themes, things with real-world weight.
Take the first movie, 1994. It absolutely nailed that slick, meta-horror vibe of the 90s. You know, where the characters kind of know the rules of horror movies. Total Scream vibes, and it was perfect.
And then, boom, the second film throws us right into a 70s summer camp. This one was a straight-up tribute to classics like Friday the 13th. You know, with the masked killer running around Camp Nightwing. You could just feel that gritty, sun-baked dread.
And the finale? It took this huge, gutsy leap all the way back to the 17th century. It brilliantly blended the slasher stuff with all the paranoia and folk horror of a witch hunt. This gave the whole trilogy this incredibly powerful origin story.
But here's the most important part. This wasn't just copying old movies. As this analysis so perfectly puts it, these films actually updated the genre. They put a queer love story front and center. They took characters who were usually just victims or sidekicks in horror and made them the heroes. They were the ones driving the change.
So after all that success, critics loved it, fans loved it, the hype for a 4th movie was just through the roof. This one, Fear Street Prom Queen, was going to be set in the totally awesome neon-soaked 80s, 1988 to be exact.
And before it even came out, all the signs were pointing to another home run. I think it was based on one of the popular R.L. Stine books. It scored that R rating for strong, bloody violence, and it was promising even more of those brutal, creative kills that we all loved. Everything was pointing in the right direction.
But then, the movie actually dropped, and all that excitement just kind of fizzled into confusion. The critics were pretty much all on the same page. It was a major disappointment.
Yeah, the big takeaway here is that critics felt like Prom Queen was a Fear Street movie in name only. I love how Manuel Sombento put it. He said it felt like it was wearing the skin of the franchise, but it just didn't have the heart, the substance that made the trilogy so special.
And this really gets to the core of the problem. The trilogy, it was digging into some really deep stuff. Systemic injustice, class warfare, trauma passed down through generations. But Prom Queen? Its themes were called banal and shallow by reviewers. Things like, teenage popularity and who gets to be prom queen.
The characters were a huge letdown too. I mean, think about the trilogy. We get these amazing, flawed heroes like Ziggy Berman, and killers that were genuinely terrifying. But in Prom Queen, the reviewers found the characters just generic. And the killers? They were described as looking more goofy than scary. Not good.
But maybe the biggest crime of all was how the movie just forgot about the Sarah Fier curse. You know, the central mythology, the glue that held the entire trilogy together, it was basically ignored, pushed to the background like some random graffiti on a bathroom wall. A total missed opportunity.
So okay, after a stumble that big, you might think, is this it for Shadyside? Well, the story might not be over just yet.
Actually, the man himself, R.L. Stine, has confirmed that Netflix is working on more Fear Street movies. So yeah, even after that misstep, this franchise is far from dead. Which leaves us with one big final question, right? To get back to what it was, does the next Fear Street need to find that original magic again?
Does it have to go back to that amazing storytelling, that thematic depth, and that pure love for horror that made us all fall in love with it in the first place?